So when I talk about micro-budget filmmaking, most people kind of have these images of just like, it's shot on an old VHS camcorder from 1999, and it's just one person sitting in a room with a broken toaster for 90 minutes. But it doesn't really need to be like that. Yes, you might be making the film for the cost of an average wedding, but you can actually have some decent production values. I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff that I've made that was made on micro budgets, and hopefully you'll notice that it's not all shot in one empty room with a broken toaster. Thank you. So what you just saw was a combination of my commercial, documentary, and narrative work. So I'll hope you'll agree that it looked okay. I was the writer and director for everything you just saw, and in most cases I was also the cinematographer, editor, sound designer, and occasionally the composer. There's this idea that filmmaking tends to be this super expensive, ridiculously complex process that's just out of the reach to everybody. If you do a Google search or you look on YouTube at behind the scenes of a feature film, you're going to see the people with the little dots in their faces. You're going to see these giant machines that are somehow used for filming stuff. You're going to see these towering sets. And you're going to think to yourself, you know what? Filmmaking's not for me. This stuff is impossibly difficult to get into. It's something that other people do. But I'm here to tell you today that that's not the only way to make a movie. This is me. That's me in the Metallica cap there in the middle. This is my entire cast. Well, not my entire cast. This is my entire crew for shooting my last movie, my fourth feature film, which is called Strangers in a Car Park. So this was a day when we had a big crew of 9 people, if you include the photographer behind the scenes there. It is something that is a fairly common sight on a micro-budget production, and you might even argue that having a crew of 9 people is actually kind of excessive, and we'll have a look at a few other models for sizes of cast and crew as well. We had a period of about 30 days to shoot the film, and on no days we had more than about 9 people. Okay, so I hear all the filmmakers in the room saying, but what kind of gear did you use? Well, don't you need fancy cameras to make movies? Well, this gear here, it looks pretty fancy, but it's actually made in China, and it costs about 5% of an industry standard kit, which would be made in Japan, Switzerland, or the US. And to my eyes, the footage looks pretty good. Some of the stuff that you saw in that little reel before was also shot on a camera like this. So for the average person at home watching a movie that's on a streaming platform after a hard day at work, they just don't care. All they want is to be watching something that is creative and engaging. They're not going to think about whether you used the correct camera. My aforementioned new movie, Strangers in a Car Park, it's an example of micro-budget cinema that prioritizes creativity over almost everything else by necessity. when you don't have much money and something goes wrong, and something will always go wrong on a feature film production, you can't just open a big briefcase of cash and just wash it away with just all the money in the world. You've actually got to be creative to solve your problems. And when you're seeking creative solutions to your problems, something magical happens. You generate novelty. So I want everybody who's aspiring to do something creative, or possibly even to make films, to consider a lack of resources to actually be a creative blessing. It's a blessing because it forces you to seek novelty. It forces you to seek humanity. It guides you away from that instinct to make something that's spectacular simply for the sake of spectacle. So let's look at a few case studies, some of the films that I've made that show what you can do with a limited amount of money. So my first experience in micro-budget feature filmmaking was when I was an honours student back in Brisbane, Australia, at the Queensland College of Art, Griffith University. My first feature film, Spud Monkey, it's about a pizza delivery boy who finally achieves his dream of being a drummer in a famous rock band, only to be replaced by computers. Now, if I were to remake that today, I guess I'd probably have him be replaced by AI. But back then, AI didn't really exist in the well, at least not as far as the general public was aware of. So this was an example of teaching me that it could be done. I went ahead and tried it, thinking that it would be a bit of a risk. Maybe it might work out, maybe it wouldn't. It was my only film that I've made, my only feature film that I've made that has not secured international distribution, but it is on YouTube. So if you want to have a free movie screening, I didn't even click the button that says monetize this, so hopefully it'll turn up without any ads. My next long-form project was called Back in the Soviet Bloc. It was a factual series that was filmed in Russia and Ukraine, and we made 7 half-hour episodes. It aired on SBS in Australia and is now available on various streaming platforms. Now, if you thought my massive crew numbers of 9 people was pretty huge, then that's the entire crew. That's me there on the left there. We had a crew of 1. So it shows that you don't need to really have a massive number of people working on your productions. All you need is a little bit of grit, and being slightly crazy helps too. For my next feature film, it was called Pop-Up. I filmed it in Australia and Romania. And this was a creative component of my PhD. Now this is a real turning point for me in terms of how I understood creativity. My thesis was all about micro-budget filmmaking. The title was Shoestring Theory, Pragmatism and Bricolage in Micro-Budget Feature Film Production. We don't need to go into all the fancy words. I'm giving you the reduced version of it. Basically 200 pages worth of thesis. We're reducing into about 10 minutes, but I'm probably already over time, aren't I? Basically what you can take away is that if you tell a really great human story, then it can transcend cultural barriers. There's this idea in Hollywood that for something to work in an overseas market, you've really got to have plenty of action, lots of exploding helicopters, because that's kind of a universal language of fist fights and action for the sake of action. But it's not necessarily the case. Pop-Up was released in China under a new title, Interweaving Destinies, and it did really well. It was so successful that after 5 years, the distributor said, we'd like to renew the contract for another 8 years. By favoring humanity over spectacle, a necessity when making films without much money, I was able to resonate in a culture that might have seemed on the surface to be remarkably difficult, remarkably different as well. So look, I would recommend, if you're an aspiring filmmaker or a storyteller or a creative person, don't be afraid to just find something that is a really human thing to say, because if you talk about the lived experience of being human, then it will relate to other humans. And if you make it specific within your own culture, then that's just going to be the sort of the cherry on top. Now, a technique that I swear by when trying to make films on a really low budget is to look at what's at your disposal and write a script around that, rather than writing a big $100,000 million epic and then asking someone to give you the money. You simply go, what have I got? And then you use that. And that's in my thesis topic, that was called bricolage. So I thought that for my next film, I would push that as far as I could. So I actually wrote to a bunch of the most beautiful bookstores in Europe. Like if you Google it and go, okay, what are the most beautiful bookstores in Europe? I pretty much wrote to all of them and said, can I film a scene from a movie there? They mostly said yes. So the ones that said yes were the ones that I wrote a script around. So with a tiny crew of 4 people, we traveled around to Romania, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Netherlands, Greece, and Australia. And we made this film, Don't Read This on a Plane. It's about a novelist who resorts to hitchhiking and sleeping rough for her promotional tour after her publisher goes bankrupt. So she'll be speaking or giving a reading from her novel in one of the most beautiful bookstores in the world, and she'll kind of dust herself off and go and sleep under a bridge. So when things went wrong on the shoot, it was kind of impossible to fly back and do a reshoot because we're actually filming on location in all these really beautiful places. So we had to get creative. So I'll give you an example of being creative on a micro-budget film. In one of the readings, this is our lead character. Character's name is Giovanna Fay. The actress is Sophie Desmarais. One of her readings was at this famous bookstore in Venice, Italy, called Libreria Acqua Alta. Now, unfortunately, I experienced the nightmare of filmmakers, which is we lost some of the footage. About half of it just vanished. I don't know where it went. But I got back to Australia, and I'm like, oh, we are missing half of her reading. What can I do? There was absolutely no chance that we could go back and actually do a reshoot. So I looked through the footage, every single second of it, and I realized there was a little section here. You can see she's kind of annoyed because we're waiting for a boat to go past. She's waiting for me to call action. So I was like, oh, if I just use that bit, then I can actually make this scene work. So I recreated the reverse angle, the people standing in front of her in Australia. So that person there is actually not the actress, that's a body double. And I actually had in order to justify the fact that she was looking so annoyed for those few seconds of usable footage, I created this scene where there's a super annoying tourist making a lot of noise when she's trying to give a book reading. Now, what happened was that not just the scene was salvaged, but it was elevated. By forcing myself to be creative, it actually made the scene better than it would have been had it actually worked out in the first place. If you're interested, Don't Read This on a Plane has been released in various markets via Blu-ray, DVD, television broadcast, and major streaming platforms. So depending on where you live, it might be available in your region. It's also been dubbed into various languages, including German and Mandarin. But even better for the world, maybe not so much for me, it's been pirated in plenty of different languages as well. So for my next film, which is the one I've just finished, which is being released in November this year, Strangers in a Car Park. I don't have any DVDs to flash around because the release happens, I believe, mid-November. But if you'd like to see it, I'm happy to share a link. Just come and talk to me afterwards. So now this came about because I'd planned to shoot a completely different film, but as is often the case, the money fell through at the last minute because the producer made big promises that he couldn't keep. So I'd already booked out a bunch of time, and I'd chosen my actors. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to pivot. So I listed my actors, and I listed the locations that I've got, and I wrote a script around that. We've got a beach, an auditorium, a hospital training ward, and a brutalist car park. In a nutshell, the way to be really creative when you don't have any money is to embrace it, make modesty your muse. And if you'd like to watch a trailer, I think that's the website of Strangers in a Car Park. So I'll leave that up for you. Cool. All right. So we'll just wrap it up there. Thank you.